Welcome. This is Tyhson Banighen with the Big Picture Revealed show, and I'm pleased to have Michael O'Connor, the resident Holistic Astrologer for the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy, back with us today. And today's topic is destiny, prediction, and predetermination. A very exciting topic, and so over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Tyson. Yeah, you know that those are very complex terms on their own ground. Being able to define the terms is the key to the deeper understanding. The basic thing initially to understand is that we do live by a destiny, and that destiny can be deemed to have stored within it a probability. Therefore, the term prediction can, or the act of measures and methods of predicting can occur. Unfortunately, that's been interpreted as the assumption that the future is predetermined. And it is by probability, just like spring will follow winter and summer will follow spring. There's a natural rhythmic order to things, and there's a certain amount of probability in all of our lives, in varying respects, and it's been studied in many different ways. So the notion of probability that's predictable is nothing new, and it's embraced by various disciplines, metaphysics and science, and others too. In other words, we can make predictions based on probability factors. Predetermination sneaks in and it almost fearfully rejects the notion because it asserts or assumes that this ability to predict a destiny or a probability, and there's more to destiny than just probability, but I just want to say it's one way of describing it, is that that the future is set in stone. That's the issue. And ironically, traditional astrology has endeavored to use techniques to minimize possibility and maximize its predictive ability to produce the outcome, to predict, the outcome. The danger is that can at worst produce an auto-suggestibility. So Western astrology actually has evolved to become more psycho-spiritual, more appreciative that it's a co-creative process. Not only is it, but that we want to encourage that it is. Like, in other words, contrary to the popular notion, but still what exists in various systems of astrology, like especially Vedic astrology, is that we want to maximize our predictive ability to suggest what probably will occur, even to the point of that will occur certainly, minimizing the possibility that free will can change that, but we feel that that's doing a service. But Western astrology has evolved to say no. Maybe it's because of the Western mind, but it's not just that. Everything from the emergence of Western psychology and the emergence of the human potential movement deeply celebrates the idea of free will. So we have free will, and we want to honor that people are co-creative beings, and the outcome can be seen as a probability, but we want to celebrate and encourage the free will participation, so it becomes a little less rigid in its assertion of this is what will happen. And that's an interesting territory for astrologers, because some astrologers, they pride themselves on that ability. And it gives credence to astrology. So it's a more delicate area to say, okay, but the danger of auto-suggestion is present, and you're robbing the person of their free will and their co-creative, that's the key phrase, function. And so that philosophy, shall we say, of that appreciation of the value, the importance of a conscious co-creative participation is brought to the surface in Western astrology.
Yeah,
One last thing.
It would also encourage codependence, which is maybe what some astrologers would like, that you have to come back periodically to get the latest updates that you couldn't possibly figure this out on your own.
Yes, that's right. It's exactly the point. Like, good life coaching is done in such a way that you're endeavoring to liberate your client from needing you. And good astrology should do that too. Good astrology, and it's probably, like, even very famous astrologers in the West, probably some of them are guilty of doing the other. They do go into the predictive. So it's not like a given just because we're in the two people or various astrologers are doing Western astrology. Some do very significantly emphasize the predictive ability, and that does generate more business. And it's a very tricky territory for astrologers, you know, especially those who are leaning more in the direction of not wanting to do that. So it kind of becomes, well, since that person's so popular, they must be really good, versus, you know, the one who's being more respectful of the free will journey and providing various quality of insights that are not becoming, producing a dependency. It's exactly correct. One little thing about predetermination too is it's an assumption made that because we're trying to make a prediction that we're thinking that it's all predetermined. And this is where, see, what happens now is you get different groups or you know, demographics of people, and basically Vedic astrologers versus Western astrologers. You know, the former being very predictive, and the latter, in its more evolved expression, minimizing that emphasis on predicting certain outcomes, but still needing to be able to be predictive. It's a bit of a dilemma of sorts. So what you hear that saying is that you have these astrologers thinking that it should be done this way, and this group of astrologers or this system of astrology thinking it should be generally done that way. Then you have other groups, like sort of a, you know, like the mainstream scientific attitude, which kind of assumes that all astrologers think the same. Mm-hmm. They do not. Each system of astrology is quite, like, in other words, even Western astrology under its umbrella has variations of style, and that would be true of Vedic astrology, most definitely. If we went to Vedic astrology conferences and were really into it, there would be definitely debate among them in various ways. Okay? Yeah. But generally speaking, they're closer to each other as would be in the West. In the West, it gets really long-winded here, and I don't want to get carried away to, there's another topic of discussion which we'll discuss next time in the focus on the Age of Aquarius, which is what's called, basically can be described as the three zodiacs. And it's a deeper understanding of zodiacs and why different philosophies and how perceptions are made by different systems of astrology, like Vedic versus Western. And there's this principle called the three zodiacs, but I'll leave that alone for now because it's tempting to want to dive in there, but I'll try to stick to topic here. The deeper theme is that we have a destiny. That's a beautiful thing to understand. it's that, because when we understand that, wow, we have a destiny, yeah. And if you go, basically, I will say with conviction that if one follows that lead down the rabbit hole, if you go, we have a destiny, ergo, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us two things. One's very spiritual and beautiful, and the other one's revolutionary. The spiritual, beautiful one is that we live in a conscious universe. That's so wonderful, and I firmly believe we do. And I wouldn't have believed that. It's not some blubbery, emotional believe in some deity as such. It's not like that. It's just, wow, this is like showing me, in my interpretation, at least of how and that astrology works, let alone why, but it goes into the why. Wow, we live in a conscious universe. Like, whew, holy smokes. And it starts to, that's why this series, it opens the doors to a deeper understanding of what archetypes mean and synchronicity, and holy, it's a whole different paradigm, which is the episode 12. We'll talk about that later in a couple episodes from now. But so we have a destiny. We live in a conscious universe. The revolutionary side of that statement is the entire cosmology of Western science must therefore be wrong in terms of a random, arbitrary attitude. There was a Big Bang. Hey, we're lucky to be here. Isn't this interesting how chemistry and biology can weave together all the miracles of creation? It's like, wow. It's like, whew, this is pretty awesome. You know, and it's like, as far as I'm concerned, that's the biggest, you could have, that's the biggest swampland sale in history. That is the biggest sale, like, you know, and they, you know, they'll say, yeah, and it all came from a pea size. Did you say a pea size? Yeah, a little pea size. Oh, okay. It's actually, I'm not a scientist, and you know, it's good to be humble about things, but as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely laughable. It's laughable. It's like, it's kind of a type of, it's funny because astrology is pointed at as regarded as a pseudoscience, but interestingly enough, this is pseudo-intellectual to get imaginative about very grandiose concepts and then glue yourself to them. Like this, therefore, oh, there was a Big Bang and therefore, and it's like, I'm almost, I say with the utmost confidence, and but you know, that's just my position on it, that it's false. It's false. The whole thing is just false. It's just a false, and it's just, as I mentioned, I'm very excited to recognize that there's a whole wave of new science coming in that's not trying to defend astrology or metaphysics at all, but they are definitely, from the standpoint of the scientific paradigm, happy to completely throw that one in the dustbin. And they are completely challenging everything from the Big Bang to black holes to the time, the notion that time is a dimension, to, you know, and they're, you know, from what I can tell, they're quite brilliant, these scientists. And so
where do you find out more about this new paradigm that's emerging? Well, let's hope it's a paradigm.
It's called the electric universe theory, and or specifically they referred to them, their movement, as the Thunderbolts project. And they basically, what's really beautiful about this system of understanding is that it is holistic, but it's not strictly speaking metaphysical, but it provides an arena for a more holistic model to emerge, which would, I believe, generally would embrace metaphysical understandings, because like it's like we know that we, in our thinking processes, science tells us, we are experiencing new neurochemical electrical charges, synapse, electricity in our brain, right? Okay. Now the electric universe model suggests that the whole universe is unified by a plasma, which they even dismiss dark energy and all. They just go, this is no. Then they can basically, by their model, prove that, or demonstrate, let's put it that way, that everything we call black or dark matter is plasma. In other words, there's no empty space. The notion of empty space is a misnomer. It's basically can be described as water, even if it's not liquid. It's like the oceans of the universe filled with galaxies. There's no notion of empty.
I'm assuming they don't consider it alive, though. Is that correct?
They don't. I think they might hold the conviction. They don't yield to deity religious thinking, by the way. They don't go there. They just basically no. They do not go into thinking it's conscious, or at least I haven't heard that.
Right.
They don't get that. They're not following the metaphysical model of dimensionality but they might, but I haven't heard it yet.
Right.
But they're not going there. They're kind of respectfully and scientifically maintaining just a very important position, which is not making any leaps of assumption or anything, but it is dismissing a whole series of theories, but which are presented as facts, like time travel, black holes, gravity, dark matter, Big Bang as at the root. And it basically goes wrong, 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 basically. And they go, and this is why it's wrong. And we'll demonstrate, and we'll predict what you're going to experience. They're really quite brilliant. So it's basically the Thunderbolts Project, the Electric Universe, and it's really tough for the mainstream science to want to acknowledge it, because it's going to basically make the whole system look ridiculous. And it's funny to say that, because there's a high level of intellect and intelligence and so forth, but they themselves assert that the model of Western science that asserts a great deal of theory based on mathematics, they're the ones who look at that mathematics as fantasy. They themselves are looking at the language of mathematics not as entirely wrong, no, not that, but a lot of the mathematics is only a story written on paper, so they'll tell you. Mm-hmm. It's like you're just making things up as far as they're concerned. You're just fabricating using mathematics, but nobody can challenge you because only a few people know that language.
So you were talking about destiny and talking about prediction, and that there's various schools on either side of that, which are, the prediction is, almost set in concrete, and our goal as astrologers is to determine what, it's going to come out, unfold for you. The exciting thing about what you're talking from a humanistic perspective is you're really talking about that there's the potentiality from your perspective for a co-creative interaction between you and the conscious universe. And that part of what you're doing is allowing maybe a map for you or for the person to begin to understand where these intersections may occur. Am I getting that right?
Yes. It's there is something to be said about prediction and probability to a certain point in some ways, but if it's not emphasized as probability, it runs into the danger of kind of playing God. It wants to, this was what will happen kind of thing. And it's basically, if you dig deep in there, it's fear-based or it's ego-based.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, if you get into, and it's outcome-focused, this will be the outcome. The other side of it, the Western astrology, the more evolved aspect of Western astrology, says we're more focused on the creative process. This is a very important statement because the process of creativity invites you to engage with your intelligence, with your, your senses, your intuitions, your own trial and error process, really. And this seems a bit contradictory to what astrology should be about. But when it celebrates process, yes, that could be called co-creative. The thing is, you see, our ego is survival based. Even though it won't, its instinct, fight or flight, survive, is there. So it doesn't care as much about process as about outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But process can be described as the soul's domain. It's like it's all about be here now, be with what's happening, and when we dig into be here now, be in the flow, it doesn't dismiss planning. It doesn't dismiss, aspiring or having a vision or dreams. It doesn't dismiss that, but it does invite a conscious co-creative process which the goal is to be intrinsic in itself. But what society has done is become very, very outcome oriented.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people who do live this way without even thinking about it. They just, they know how to be in the moment. Their lives are set up in such a way that they know how to have simple pleasures. This is not uncommon. It's out there for sure. There's a fair amount of that, but historically we were more in survival. And then in modern age, we weren't having to be, but we entered into it because now we can manipulate the system and have more than we ever did before. So it gets a bit tricky. We get kind of enslaved by our own appetites. So it's a bit tricky. But anyway, getting back to it, the destiny includes free will, and at a very mystical kind of level of perception, sort of a bit radical for some, but we can entertain that there's only oneness in existence, and paradoxically, we are in it, but it's in us. So we go, what's it? This is where we get to Star Wars, the Force, mm-hmm. the divinity. So what it means, though, this is a paradox. It's not the easiest thing to explain, is that the divinity inside you is a divinity that's shared. It's just it's not a separation, but you're experiencing it as an individual. But it is the God force in you, the God, like the spark of divinity in you is that which wants to engage in a co-creative way, because it's a joy to create, and B, it's a part of the plan that as we engage in co-creative activity, we learn how to be good at it. It's a funny thing to say. It says, well, why would God, I don't pretend to have all the answers here. Why would God or some higher power care that, it would experience itself through us? And it's sort of almost like saying, well, and this is a simplistic way of saying it, it's like, well, because eternity got boring. It wanted to experience itself is one answer, but it kind of, the paradox is that it's all God, shall we say, okay, not again some denominational religious thinking here, just a force of existence, but it experiences it through each individual, but each individual kind of has their own semi-autonomous existence where, you know, where we get to enjoy it as our own.
And this is, isn't this where the co-creative process comes about, is we each of us in our own way get to create our own individual universe depending on how we want to play in it. It's almost like our own playpen, and then collectively the bigger playpen is the culture we live in, which is the collective of how we all perceive our individual worlds, and then those perceptions become the way that we see the world, true or untrue, and then we have things like scientific beliefs or religion or whatever, which is a collection of those beliefs, and we all assume that it's real, but it's really conspiring to some way of interpreting this co-creative relationship with all that is, that has no separation. Like you say, it's a great, wonderful paradox.
It's a great, wonderful paradox, and yeah, it's there. Whoever's involved, like whether it's this philosophers or scientists or mathematicians or other theorists, and it doesn't matter who, invariably they all have an ego. It feels good to feel like we're right.
And part of a tribe.
A part of a tribe, exactly, that, you know, we know and they don't know. The problem is, and it would be fine, it's okay to feel good about that, but the problem is, it's when it's fear-based, it becomes exclusive.
Yeah.
It contradicts inclusivity, so it more or less becomes possessive of its position and growling at the prospect that somebody would come in on its territory, because holding that position, which is an illusion, becomes the vehicle or the access point for various privileges.
Yeah, it reminds me of being a kid and creating a club, and you're either in the club or not in the club, and there's certain things you've got to agree to be a member of this elusive club. And as big kids, we're probably not too much different about how we perceive a club and membership and rights and privileges and all the rest of that, whether it be a societal club, a philosophic club, a scientific club, or whatever. It's interesting that the word is club, like it's almost like club you into a belief system or into a way of seeing the world.
It's basically it becomes that. So, you know, it gets a bit tricky as you dig down deeper into these things, and you start to realize that the entire mindset is supporting other attitudes and or activities. That's the whole conspiracy idea, by the way, is that the whole theme of Western science with the Big Bang, the unfortunate danger, the biggest price we pay is that it deeply reinforces a materialism, a materialistic philosophy. Materialism, okay, we like things, we like to have, we need food, clothing, and shelter, and we like pleasure. That's all good. But if materialism at worst asserts that there's nothing else to you, then, you know, you're just a random expression of creation. Consider yourself lucky and good luck, you know. So what that does is two things. Well, it does more than two things, but one thing, it keeps you in an ego state. You're sleeping. There's no evolving. There's nothing to do. There's just be who you are and be simple, and there's no.
Don't forget to consume.
And consume. The other side of it is that the more that the materialistic philosophy or materialism takes root, the more it breeds like nihilism, which is similar to what we just said, but also it justifies various types of thinking and action, like, for example, transhumanism. It starts to become, well, since there's nothing else, we might as well, whoever, has the power and the leverage and the whatever, then, we have every right and reason to do this. So it becomes very, once again, basically speaking, exclusive. Like, for example, now this is a bit of a tricky one, and not everybody would agree maybe, but right now with this whole 5G thing, it's kind of being rammed down our throats all of a sudden. You know about 5G.
You mean a higher level of communication they'll be using for cell phone?
Yeah. There's a danger. Now, I don't really know, but the idea is that it's the bandwidths are in millimeters now. This is very, very, potentially very, very dangerous. But it takes a position of, it starts becoming aggressive, subject to its rooted, like in the core of materialism is a fear. And when you get fear, you get fight or flight. So if you have power, you become aggressive. So if you become aggressive, you're not listening, and you lose touch with your humanity. You don't care that others don't like it. So you become top dog, and it starts becoming very problematic because it creates a type of, another form of tyranny.
Let me just talk quickly about this as an aside, because you're touching on a very, very important topic for people to know about. And for those that want to research more, just in Google search, Take Back Your Power Now. What Michael's talking about is the bandwidth that even current Wi-Fi and cell phones is using is very close to our own human brain frequencies that we exist on. And therefore, the potentiality for mind control or, mind control assumes somebody knows what they're doing and wants to convey something on those same frequencies. But that, even if that were not occurring, the fact that it's broadcasting on the same frequencies that influence us, whether there's intelligence behind what's being broadcast, it really can deleteriously affect humans. And there's a lot of proof around those that are hypersensitive, like particularly children with autism and those sorts of things, that it really, really does debilitate them. And there's been quite a move to remove Wi-Fi from schools because students improve dramatically when they're not living in this sea of energy that adversely affects them. Anyway, this is a whole topic that's really worth your while to research. And of course, on top of this, this 5G. When you think about it, we're getting closer and closer to the bandwidth of telepathy, which we're moving towards where we won't need the technology to communicate with each other. But when the technology is on the same bandwidth, it starts to interfere with us from a materialistic perspective, then we're in trouble. It's like technology is taking over where humans should be. I guess that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you get into materialism, it has a series of problems, but one of the reason it starts to call it sinister, if you like, and it does really get there, is because it starts to celebrate its economy behind its technology. That the economy behind the technology is a massive bit of power, right? And it becomes very dictatorial. And then, so if there's no sense of soul or no sense of anything else, there's no discussion. It becomes right, might or right.
Right. There's no,
Might is right.
no virtue or morals to the process. I mean, if the bottom line is consumerism, then having a smart meter that can tell when the person gets up, when they open their fridge, maybe not tell you exactly what you're eating, but will tell you when you're turning the lights on and off, and when you're using certain technological appliances that have that in, as part of their chip. You can accumulate this energy and then make predictions about when people are going to shop or do whatever they could do, which is the same problem Microsoft too, but Facebook is going through right now is, what data is ours and what data is theirs. And I say theirs in the sense of being able to be more targeted in their consumerism and give us what they think we need in order to consume. So if you have no morals, you have no virtues around this, then we can get ourselves into trouble really quickly.
You got it. And this is the key, is the thing is, once you dismiss the notion of a conscious universe, once you dismiss the notion of a destiny, once you dismiss the notion of that there's a deeper rhyme and reason to existence, once you dismiss all these things, then what you do is you maneuver yourself to set up a society which then becomes directly and indirectly coercive, and you take control of prediction. You dismiss the notion of destiny. You dismiss any deeper sense of spontaneity, authenticity, a sense of even the privilege of entering into a co-creative trial and error process of life. You dismiss all of that. The person now is no longer a human, a person, a soul. They're now merely a commodity. And then what you want to do is that commodity has certain functions like consuming. So what you want to do is to hook them up to your sale, what you want to sell them. And then what you want to do is study the predictability and or the probability of what they're going to do. Then you market to that. So it becomes it's like a set of like a trap. It's a trap, and those who are like the average Joe, even involved in installing towers, doesn't know this strictly. You don't know who knows what or who doesn't know, but it could at worst be that it's all a mass assumption producing a mass reaction, and that it's sort of like the blind leading the blind, and like a sort of a sinister mindset starts to emerge. It starts becoming dismissive, and it starts to close itself off to any objection. Right?
Yeah, the thing is, even if it isn't sinister, the fact that this is operating on the like for example, with cell towers and 5G is operating on and the level or the brain waves, the electromagnetic brain waves bandwidth of our intelligence is really, it's really intrusive, if nothing else, even if it isn't being used for mind control. But it makes it so easy to step into the mind control potentiality that makes it even scarier.
What I meant by sinister, what I mean here is, if you are convinced that you're completely atheistic and you're absolutely convinced there's nothing more to you than your own, relatively superficial thought processes, you're purely just an empirically being, there's nothing more but empiricism to you, right? What happens is your mind starts to become very rational. All actions become rationalized. So we all can appreciate and celebrate reason and rationale, but when we need to honor intuition and instinct. and other, like, we can talk about emotional intelligence. So we can go into all kinds of, and we can go into psychic, and we can go into other, levels of communication where we begin to realize, wow, as a whole being, there's all these different facets of the way I think and perceive, etc. But what this does is it starts to narrow it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because the fear inside you, there's this inner like switch, call it once again fight or flight. And if you have within you the natural proclivity to fight, you're going to use your rationale to, in effect, it will start becoming just what we're seeing, dismissive, and it will practically focus on things like the Georgia stone, what do they call the Georgia guidestones or whatever, where we go, well, we've decided that we should just have, 250 million people on the planet, and we've got a problem. And the problem is called the population. And we have a plan. And so you go, okay. So this Georgia Guidestone thing, just to say it, those who don't know about it, might be worth looking into it. It's like, who are you? And when did you put, was this on the news? No, it was put up in secret. And so what I'm basically getting at is that it represents the rationale of a highly materialistic mindset. And so when I go back full circle to destiny and prediction, just the fact that you can study destiny and you can make predictions that do produce probabilities that are accurate, but even though you're trying not to over predict the outcome because you want to honor the free will journey and be respectful of the person's choices, etc., their individuality. Okay. All of that's there, and it shows, as I mentioned, that, ergo, it can be interpreted that we live in a conscious universe. So it starts opening up the doors to the humanity that we all want. We want to celebrate that we are more than just, an amalgamation of atoms, that we are embodied souls. And that type of mindset, the type of knowledge begins to give you a lot of credence to this.
Yeah.
You start to realize, yeah, that's the bottom line. But that's the higher, deeper purpose or value of even subjects like astrology, that they prove in their own way. They demonstrate that there's something more. But the mindset of the modern materialistic movement really is to shut that down. It's nonsense. It's dismissive. It's not, we can prove this to be wrong. It's not a part of our paradigm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's interesting because you made me really realize, the sort of the Ayn Rand, attitude that really it's only the scientists and the intellectuals that should make the decisions on the global level on behalf of humanity, because we're the only people that really know, because of our materialistic perspective, that these solutions need to occur. And on the positive side, we're doing it on behalf of humanity because, well, they're not smart enough to understand how to do this, or even that there's a problem. And at the manipulative level, it's our right to do this because we're the new high priests and priestesses of this, because we know what's best for everybody, and therefore we need to do it for not only our own survival, but for the survival of humanity. And that's a really strong belief, both culturally, socially, and politically on the planet right now. Like you say, it's almost the dominant paradigm that, we can't possibly inform the public about what we're doing because they're not capable of understanding how important these situations are. So we'll just won't give them the facts.
We will massively patronize,
Yes.
and the day we will engage in exclusive and highly secretive networks. We will not let you know who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. We're going to hide this. The hiding is the beginning of that. It's not just that there's a secret, it's that there's an intentional deception.
Right. Yeah. That's where it gets really dangerous.
So we run into, there's many problems because what it becomes is it becomes, it enters into a vortex of what I called sinister, because it becomes rationalized, justified, and you said it, rights, freedoms, privileges.
Yes.
The irony that its focus on its rights in an exclusive attitude is dismissive of the very same in others.
Right.
We have the right. Oh, who are you?
So when we come back to
Like,
this co-creative interchange, which comes from, that we all have a destiny, and that astrology can help us understand and give us some perspective or viewpoints or understanding about our destiny, it brings us back to, for whoever wants to pursue that ability to know in a broader scope, in a more holistic perception of where they fit into the evolution of consciousness, that they have a way to participate. That's really an exciting counterbalance to this, because it doesn't assume, it just makes it available for anybody who wants to make that step. The ability to actually not only have a sense of their own value with regard to the whole, but also a prescriptive way in which they can move through these more dark times and find a way that's inclusive and co-creative and humanitarian, in that it has the best, it concludes the best outcome for all concerned. So it's a nice, exciting balance to what we're talking about, is what you're offering.
yeah. Yes, that is really, it sort of, in its root, it kind of goes back to what could be deemed, it's not really religious, it's more like a spiritual realization that we live in a conscious universe that's intentional, that actually all things exist on purpose. Therefore, we are a part of that purpose. And then we, as expressions of it, can then begin to identify what's our purpose.
Right.
We have purpose as we exist in purpose. And our purpose is, at its essence, that we're evolving, that the purpose of existence has an evolutionary dynamic, a progressive evolutionary dynamic. I think it's fair to say. Some might argue that, but just to say. But invariably, our humanity wants to contribute to that collective benefit. Like you said, our purpose becomes contributing. But in a materialistic model, the contributing becomes very highly rationalized, and at worst becomes very fear-based, because it's survival. Because if you think there's nothing else, if you think there's just a dark, empty abyss or of nothingness when you die, right, which is contrary to the conscious universe, which opens the doors to a multidimensional, understanding, which is reinforced as proof from everybody, from psychics, from telepathy, astrology, all of what science has deemed pseudoscience, conveniently, because that they're saying, in effect, that's not our business, literally and figuratively. Yes, it's not your business. I get that. So the good scientists themselves don't always know they're being used by those who's in business, all right. So it becomes a bit dark right here. And then it becomes highly rationalized, thinking that since there's nothing else, since there's no rhyme or reason to it all, it's just whatever, suddenly it's either basically like it's you or I.
Yeah. And then in the scope of science, it gets even scarier that I can only, if I have an agenda, I only hire those scientists that will give me the prescription and the conclusions that I want. And now I can ignore all the other science. So like global warming, it's not in my interest to admit that there's global warming, because I'd have to change my plans for America, for example, or for the Western world or whatever. And therefore I'll just use certain science that supports my general theory that climate change is a hoax. I'm just using this as an example. And so scientists then become like pawns on a chessboard. We use the ones we want and we leave the ones we don't want.
Yeah, it always comes down to power and control. And if we dig deep, you get into organized crime circles or syndicates, if you like. And it's anybody's guess, but to assume there isn't organized crime would be an assumption. But there's many assumptions that we as humans live by in terms of how power is structured and how it all works. But humanity is waking up, but that's partially also why the great sad and irony is the more we wake up, the more this mindset has to move faster. Mm-hmm. It has to, that's a kind of a sad, strange, dangerous thing. I feel a little worried sometimes. We're turning right now, let alone we're at a very, very delicate time in history where it's not, the implications are very dangerous. Like in other words, basically going back to 5G, that technology can be used as a weapon just at the flick of a switch. And that's now some will be dismissive about that, but a great deal of genuine scientists, doctors are suggesting no, this is real danger, but they're not even the great irony of our times also is that even though they're scientists and maybe they too are directly and indirectly, conscious and unconsciously involved in the materialistic conviction of the paradigm, they aren't a part of that club. They're not a part of that. So they become like casualties in the very game that they sort of find themselves in. So I'm not judging anybody. Everybody, life's complex and you have to make a living and you do your best. And so it's not for a moment to suggest that people who work in the scientific community, a lot of them aren't just the best of people. But the danger is that, basically speaking, the conclusions of materialism are very dangerous. And the realities of destiny and our ability to predict it is actually its own form of proof. It's actually a form of proof. It's one of the bigger forms of proof. No, there is something going on. There is a rhyme and reason, but and reasonable people would see that. But what'll happen is that by the way, I would go as far as to say, simply putting it, materialistic paradigm, the materialistic philosophy is the ground of psychopathology. It will create a psychopathic attitude. you lose your survival instinct overrides your emotional intelligence and your intuition. And then if your survival instinct is supported by others who share that survival instinct, and if you band together in one fashion or another, so it's really a crazy time we're in, and it's really important that people kind of wake up. And we are living at a time where people are waking up. There's lots, but this is where we'll talk about it next time with the Age of Aquarius. One important part of the Age of Aquarius is it can be understood as an information war theme, very deeply woven into it. So I'll save that, but the timelines of the Age of Aquarius are interesting to discuss, and just the fact that what's going on in the world is synchronistic of Aquarius energy.
Yeah, interesting enough from the Mayan perspective that this time, everybody said, well, 2012 came and went and nothing happened. It wasn't the end of the world. Well, it was the end of the world in the way that we were unfolding. And what we're in now in the stage is make this turn called the Age of Aquarius, or the beginning of, the new 26,500 year grand cycle, or however you want to interpret this. Is from the Mayans, this is the time at which the truth will be revealed. So it's like the shadows that have been able to be not seen because of the darkness that they can sort of lurk in. As the light increases, the shadows become illuminated. You can see the illusions for what they are, like the emperor has no clothes, like the wizard behind the curtain, and in the Wizard of Oz. These things just become apparent on their own. And this is what you're talking about in the Age of Aquarius, that these two ways of seeing the world start to become juxtaposed to each other. And so there's an information war, that if the matrix is coming down, then it behooves me, if I'm part of the matrix, I want to glue it all back together, or refabricate it, or divert people's attention, because without the matrix, I don't have the control that I need, or we don't have the control. And on the other hand, the truth has to be revealed so that we could go through the evolution in consciousness that the ages can provide to us, whether we want to or not, which is the beauty of these cycles, is that as humans, we think we're in control, but in actual fact, on the grand scheme of things, we're sort of along for the ride. I mean, as these ages, revolve, the consciousness comes on its own. Yes, we wake up, but it's almost like a foregone conclusion. So then we're left with the choices that you're providing, which is through, having a reading, for example, is how much do you want to get actively, how much do you want to be an active participant in this process? Do you want to just, be in fear, or be a detached observer and hope that it's all going to work out? Or do you want to have an idea of what your role might be in it, which is, this whole idea of what is your destiny in the grand scheme of things? And then you can be more of a participant. And then, if on the collective level, you can find like-minded people that share the same commonality, not to create a religion or a cult, but to support you in this endeavor of showing up in a more humanistic way. So I find this really, really exciting, because it really does show us the paradox that we're in right now, or the emerging of a new paradigm. This is an exciting time. And for all of us on the planet, we chose really wise to show up at this time. If you believe in reincarnation, we did a good job. We did our homework. And for that, I'm truly grateful.
Yeah. Some final words here. It's also can be dealt a paradox, a conundrum is a good way of saying it too. Just one last thing, and thank you for that about the readings. Yes, one above and beyond while yes, I can, looking at one's chart, really see who they are by their nature and where they're at, and I can see this sense of purpose and destiny, and you can bring wisdom, insight producing wisdom with that. You can do a lot with one good reading, and it really gets things moving. But basically, even at a more intrinsic level, just by the experience and realizing that through the tool that you can be seen, that so intimate facts about your life can be mapped and recognized, and the suggestion of which is that we live in a conscious universe. And if you could put those two dots together, it might change you above and beyond even what's said about your destiny and how you might go about it, just by the realization, oh my God, that could see me. And therefore, the idea that once again is, wow, I live in a conscious universe, and that right there can, prospectively at least, produce a paradigm shift.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you're saying, because what you're saying is that the conscious universe can demonstrate to you that it has a perception of who you are in the great scheme of things and how you might fit in if you so choose to do so. And that is an exciting thing. I mean, everybody on this planet wants to know that they're appreciated or loved, or that there's something outside of themselves that, that they can identify, or at least identifies with them, or what's the purpose of all this. So it's an exciting dynamic relationship that you're talking about, that there's something greater than yourselves that gives you a viewpoint or an insight on who you are and why you're here. That's exciting.
Yeah, there's a benevolence at the root of it. It invariably becomes a life that's happening for you principle. Yes. And it invites, by that very statement, it invites a conscious, cooperative, co-creative participation versus an unconscious, competitive survival instinct, which invariably becomes exclusive, highly rationalized, and psychopathic. And we have a lot of evidence of that. A lot of evidence on the planet, from the wars we see, and there's more. People are generally good, and although some are more imbalanced than others, most people are generally good. But unfortunately, congregations of certain mindsets, can be coercive with one another.
Right.
And so anyway, I'll leave it there. Just that, the very fact that it works is illustrative of a conscious universe, and invariably a benevolent one.
Well, Michael, thank you ever so much. It was a wonderful discussion. It gave me new ways to see the world that we're living in, the paradigm that we're about to see dissolve around us, and the new paradigm that's emerging in this exciting turn of the ages. So I'm looking forward to the Age of Aquarius. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful show. Until next week, be healthy, wealthy, and wise, everybody.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Tyson. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
The Big Picture Revealed show is sponsored by the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy, hosted by Facebook Live on the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy Facebook page, produced by The Wellness Show, www.thewellnessshow.ca, and stay tuned, same place, same time. See you next week. Bye for now.